Christmas expecting heat, lights, something that felt like family. Instead, the house hit me like a freezer. My breath fogged the hallway, no tree, no music, just silence so loud it hurt. Then I saw the note on the counter, neat like it was normal. James, we're off on the cruise. Since you're arriving early, you've got things covered with Grandpa. See you in 2 weeks. Mom and Dad. I remember rereading it because my brain wouldn't accept what my eyes already knew. They didn't go to midnight service. They didn't have a power outage. They left on the morning of the 23rd, on purpose, knowing I wasn't scheduled to land until Christmas Day. They gave themselves a 36-hour window where they knew he'd be alone in the dark. I followed a sound, barely a groan, into the dark guest room at the end of the hall. He was there, my grandfather Oliver. Shivering so hard the bed frame trembled against the floor, skin the color of winter, lips turning blue. They didn't forget him. They left him to die. I called 911 with my hands shaking, and when the paramedics lifted him onto the gurney, his eyes cracked open just enough to find mine. His voice came out in a rasp, each word costing him. James, don't let them take the rest. And in that moment I realized this wasn't just a family problem. It was a line you can't uncross. My parents had gambled that I'd arrive too late, that Oliver would be gone before anyone could ask questions, that they'd return from their luxury cruise to a convenient funeral in an empty house they could finally sell. They were wrong. Before I tell you everything, the hidden documents, the stolen money, the legal ambush I set while they sipped champagne on the deck of a ship, I just need to know I'm not saying this into the void. Drop a simple hello in the comments or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is there makes the truth easier to carry. And if you can, please hit subscribe. Not for me, but because stories like this happen behind closed doors every day. The more we talk about them, the harder it gets for people to abandon the ones who can't fight back. My name is James Smith, and this is what really happened. I came home for Christmas with that stupid, simple hope people carry even when they swear they're past it. A warm house, a little noise, something that says you still belong somewhere. The streets of Erie, Pennsylvania, were already buried in that kind of winter that doesn't feel like a season so much as a warning. Black ice slicked the roads. Twinkle lights glowed soft gold in every window. Inflatable snowmen leaned against porches like they'd given up. I pulled into my parents' driveway and my stomach tightened before I even killed the engine. Their house was dark. Not everyone's asleep dark. Dead dark. No colored bulbs along the gutters. My father had even stripped the wreath off the door. It wasn't just that they weren't celebrating. It was like they were already clearing the stage for a for sale sign. Just a silent box sitting in the cold like it had been abandoned for weeks. I sat there for a second with my hands on the wheel, my duffel bag on the passenger seat, my brain trying to talk me out of what my gut already knew. Maybe the power's out. Maybe they went to visit neighbors. Maybe I'm early. Then I stepped out, and the cold slapped me awake. The air had teeth. Snow squeaked under my boots. The wind pushed at the bare trees like it was annoyed they were still standing. The front door opened too easily, like it hadn't been locked in days. The cold inside hit harder than the cold outside. My breath fogged instantly, thick and white, and I could smell it. Stale air, old carpet, that metallic bite that comes when heat hasn't run for a long time. I reached for the railing out of habit, and my palm met wood that was ice cold. The kind of cold that travels up your bones. The heater wasn't just down, it had been turned off, on purpose. I walked in slowly, listening. No hum of the furnace. No ticking from the vents, no TV murmuring in the background. Nothing. The living room was a dark shape, curtains pulled tight, no tree in the corner, no ornaments, no stockings. It didn't look like a house preparing for Christmas. It looked like a house someone had cleared out on purpose, like warmth had been evicted. My duffel hit the carpet with a dull thud and the sound felt too loud. I moved toward the kitchen because that's where my mother always left notes. Grocery lists, reminders, passive-aggressive little messages with too many exclamation points. The countertop caught a strip of streetlight from outside. In the middle of it sat a single sheet of paper placed neat and flat like it belonged there. I picked it up and read it once. "James, we're off on the cruise. Since you're arriving early, you've got things covered with Grandpa. See you in 2 weeks. Mom and Dad." They knew I wasn't arriving for another 36 hours. They wrote that note specifically to make it look like I was already in the house when they left. I read it again because my brain refused to cooperate. A cruise during Christmas. The words were so casual it felt obscene, like they'd written, "Water the plants" instead of "Keep a human being alive." I stared at the handwriting and tried to imagine my mother saying it out loud with that breezy voice she used when she wanted something to sound harmless. Then I heard it, so faint I almost missed it. A sound that wasn't the house settling, not a pipe, not the wind. A muffled, weak groan like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of snow. My body moved before my thoughts caught up. The hallway felt colder, like the temperature dropped with every step. I called out once, my voice echoing into the emptiness. "Grandpa?" No answer, just another small broken sound. The guest room door was pulled nearly shut. I pushed it open and the darkness inside wasn't normal darkness. It had weight. I pushed the door wide and the darkness gave way to shape and sound. The bed frame was rattling. A steady metallic tremor that came from the man curled on top of it, Library Oliver. His body was pulled tight, knees to chest, arms wrapped around himself like he was trying to hold his own heat inside. The blanket had slipped to the floor hours ago, maybe days. His skin looked wrong in the dim light bleeding through the curtained window. Waxy, gray. The color of something left out in winter too long. His lips were slate blue. I was across the room before I finished processing what I was seeing. Marines don't get the luxury of freezing up. I switched into salute mode. Size, activity, location, unit, time, equipment. I wasn't looking at my grandfather. I was looking at a casualty in a cold weather environment. I needed to stabilize the asset before the mission changed to recovery. You assess, you act. You deal with the horror later. I grabbed the blanket off the floor and threw it over him, then pulled off my coat and laid it across his chest. His whole body shook so hard I could feel the vibrations through the mattress frame. "Grandpa, Oliver, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His breath came in short, shallow pulls that barely moved his chest. I yanked my phone out and dialed 911, wedging it between my shoulder and ear while I climbed onto the bed beside him. I wrapped my arms around him and pulled him close, trying to transfer body heat the way we'd been drilled in cold weather survival training. He felt like holding a bag of ice. 911, what's your emergency? I need an ambulance. My grandfather's hypothermic. He's been left in an unheated house. I don't know how long. His lips are blue. He's unresponsive, breathing shallow. What's the address? I rattled it off, then added, the heat's been turned off. The whole house is freezing. Is he breathing? Yes, barely. Stay on the line. Help is on the way. Can you get him to a warmer room? I looked around the guest room. The air itself felt like it had teeth. The whole house is the same temperature. They shut the system down. There was a pause on the other end. Someone shut off the heat. In December? That's what I'm telling you. Okay, keep him covered. Don't rub his arms or legs. That can cause cardiac arrest and severe hypothermia. Just hold him still and keep him wrapped. I held Oliver against my chest and felt his heart beating too slow, too weak. His shivers were starting to ease, which I knew from training wasn't a good sign. It meant his body was giving up the fight. "Stay with me, Grandpa," I whispered. "Stay with me." The ambulance arrived in 7 minutes. I heard the sirens first, then boots on the front porch, then voices calling out. "Back here," I shouted. 2 EMTs came through the door fast, pulling a gurney and a trauma bag. The first one, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes, took one look at Oliver and started barking orders to her partner. "Severe hypothermia, possible stage 3. Let's get blankets on him and check his core temp." They moved with practiced efficiency, wrapping Oliver in thermal blankets and checking his vitals. The second EMT, a younger guy with a buzz cut, glanced around the room and frowned. "How long has he been like this?" "I don't know. I just got here. My parents left him." The woman looked up. "Left him?" "They went on a cruise. I found a note in the kitchen." The buzz-cut EMT stood and walked to the hallway. I heard him stop, then swear under his breath. "Hey, Jenna, come look at this." The woman, Jenna, stepped out. I followed. Buzzcut was standing in front of the thermostat in the hallway, staring at the digital display like it had personally offended him. 45 degrees, he said slowly. Someone set it to 45 degrees. Jenna's face went hard. "That's not an accident." "No," Buzzcut said, "that's not." They looked at each other, then at me. Something passed between them, a silent professional acknowledgement that what they were witnessing wasn't neglect. It was a crime scene. "We're taking him to Erie General," Jenna said, her voice clipped. "You'll want to follow us, and you'll want to call Adult Protective Services tonight." They loaded Oliver onto the gurney and wheeled him out into the cold Pennsylvania night, where the Christmas lights of the neighboring houses glowed warm and gold, mocking the darkness they were leaving behind. I stood in the freezing hallway staring at that thermostat and felt something shift inside my chest. My parents had done this on purpose, and now there were witnesses. The hospital room smelled like disinfectant and recycled air. Oliver had been moved from the ER to observation 2 hours ago, hooked to monitors that beeped in steady rhythm. His color had improved from slate gray to something closer to human, though his hands still trembled when he tried to lift them. I sat in the chair beside his bed, watching his chest rise and fall, counting each breath like it was currency I couldn't afford to lose. His eyes opened slowly, focusing on the ceiling first, then turning toward me. Recognition came in stages. Confusion, then relief, then something darker that settled behind his gaze like sediment. "James," he whispered. His voice was sandpaper rough. "Don't try to talk yet. You're safe. You're at Erie General." He shook his head, the movement small but insistent. Need to tell you." I leaned closer. "Tell me what?" "Your father." He swallowed hard, wincing. "Stephen, he's been taking money from my accounts for months." The words hung in the sterile air between us. I'd suspected greed, but hearing it confirmed still felt like a punch to the gut. "How much?" "Thousands, maybe more." I stopped keeping track when he convinced me when he said I was losing my mind. Oliver's jaw tightened. He'd show me bank statements with his explanations written in the margins, medical expenses, home repairs, emergency funds, all lies. "Why didn't you call me?" He took my phone, said the bills were too high, cut the landline, said we didn't need it anymore. Oliver's hand reached for mine, cold fingers gripping with surprising strength. "James, there's more. Your grandmother, before she died, she knew what Stephen would become." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "What do you mean?" "She left me something, a blue folder. hidden in the attic behind the insulation near the east gable. Wendy never found it. Stephen doesn't know it exists. His breathing quickened, and the monitor beeped faster. Your grandmother wrote everything down. A revised will. Bank account numbers Stephen doesn't have access to. And a letter. She said his greed would one day freeze the heart of the home. Oliver was left to die in a frozen room while his own children spent his medicine money on a luxury cruise. If your heart breaks for a man betrayed by his own blood, please like this video right now. Every like tells the algorithm that stories of the vulnerable matter more than the lifestyle of the greedy. Don't just scroll past a man who was almost erased by his own family. Show your support for the truth. The phrase hit me like prophecy fulfilled. She wrote that? Those exact words? Oliver nodded. She didn't trust Stephen, hadn't for years, but she trusted you. The folder has your name on it, James. She meant for you to find it when the time came. He coughed, and I grabbed the water cup from the bedside table, helping him take small sips. I think she knew he'd try something like this eventually. Why didn't you tell me before? Because I kept hoping I was wrong, that my own son wouldn't. His voice cracked. But when they turned off the heat and left that note, I knew. They weren't coming back for me, they were waiting for me to die. The monitors beeped steadily in the silence that followed. Outside the window, Erie stretched out under December darkness. Christmas lights twinkling in neighborhoods where families weren't trying to murder each other for inheritance money. The blue folder, I said quietly. East gable, behind the insulation. Don't let them know you found it, not yet. Oliver's grip tightened again. Your father is smart, James, cruel and smart. If he knows you're onto him, he'll destroy evidence, move money, lawyer up before you can prove anything. Then I won't tell him. Good. Oliver's eyes started to drift closed, exhaustion pulling him under. Good boy. Your grandmother always said you had her spine. I sat back and watched him slip into sleep, his breathing evening out, color slowly returning to his face. The nurse came in to check vitals and adjusted his IV, giving me a small nod before leaving us alone again. I pulled out my phone and made 2 calls. The first was to Adult Protective Services. The second was to a lawyer I'd served with who specialized in elder abuse cases. Both conversations started the same way. I need to document a crime, and I need to do it before the suspects come home. The investigator from Adult Protective Services arrived at the hospital the next morning carrying a leather portfolio and the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much human cruelty. Her name was Diane Vasquez, and she didn't waste time with pleasantries. Mr. Smith, I've reviewed the paramedic report and spoken with the attending physician. Your grandfather's case meets the threshold for emergency intervention. She sat across from me in the family waiting room, pulling out a legal pad. Walk me through what you found when you arrived at the house. I told her everything. The dark house, the freezing interior, the note left on the counter like an afterthought, the thermostat set to 45 degrees. Finding Oliver curled in that guest room, shivering so hard the bed frame rattled. Diane took notes in neat shorthand, her pen moving steadily across the page. When I finished, she looked up with an expression I couldn't quite read. The thermostat setting is critical, she said. It establishes intent. If the heat had simply failed, that's one thing. But manually setting it that low in December in Pennsylvania with a vulnerable adult in the house? She shook her head. That's not neglect. That's endangerment. So what happens now? I'll open a formal investigation. We'll document everything, medical records, the condition of the home, witness statements from the paramedics. I'll need to inspect the property myself. She paused, studying my face. Where are your parents right now? On a cruise. They won't be back for another 12 days. Something shifted in Diane's expression. Do they know you found him? No, I haven't called them. Good. She leaned forward slightly. James, I need you to understand something. Cases like this, they fall apart when the perpetrators get advance warning. If your parents know an investigation is underway, they'll have time to craft narratives, delete evidence, move money, consult lawyers who specialize in making this look like a misunderstanding. I felt my jaw tighten. So what are you saying? I'm saying don't call them, don't text, don't give them any indication that something's wrong. Let them enjoy their cruise. Let them think everything went according to plan. And when they walk back through that door, we'll have every piece of documentation we need to strip their authority over your grandfather permanently. The weight of what she was suggesting settled over me. Every instinct I had screamed to call my father right now, to unleash every ounce of rage I'd been holding back since finding Oliver half frozen in that room. To make them feel even a fraction of the fear he must have felt. But Diane was right. Righteous anger was a luxury I couldn't afford if I wanted to actually protect Oliver. It's going to be hard, Diane continued, reading my face. You're going to want to confront them, that's natural. But if you do it too early, before we have ironclad proof, they'll mount a defense. They'll say Oliver was confused, that the thermostat was broken. That they left you clear instructions to care for him. Rich people are very good at making their cruelty sound reasonable in court. How do I build that proof? Document everything. Take photos of the house, the thermostat, the empty pantry, the disabled landline. Get statements from neighbors about when they saw your parents leave. Save that note they left you. Keep a timeline of Oliver's recovery and what the doctors say about how long he was exposed. She pulled a business card from her portfolio and slid it across the table. And stay in contact with me. We're going to build a case so airtight that when we present it, there's no room for them to wriggle out. I took the card and stared at it, feeling something cold and methodical replace the hot rage in my chest. My parents thought they were clever. Thought they'd found a way to eliminate an inconvenient problem while they sipped champagne under Caribbean sun. They had no idea they'd just given me 2 weeks to dismantle their lives. I returned to the house alone the next afternoon with my phone fully charged and Diane's instructions running through my head like a mission briefing. Document everything. Make it undeniable. The front door still opened too easily. Inside, the cold hadn't improved. If anything, it felt colder now that I knew it was deliberate. I pulled out my phone and started recording, narrating as I moved through the house like I was filing an after-action report. December 26th, 2:15 p.m. The thermostat in the main hallway. I zoomed in on the digital display. Still set to 45 degrees, no sign of malfunction. Manual setting clearly visible. I moved to the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. The light flickered on, illuminating mostly empty shelves. A bottle of ketchup, some wilted lettuce, a carton of milk that had expired 3 days before Christmas. Refrigerator contents, I narrated. Minimal food. Nothing that would sustain an elderly person for 2 weeks. The pantry was worse. I opened the door and filmed the sparse shelves. A box of crackers, 2 cans of soup, a jar of peanut butter. Pantry inventory. Insufficient provisions for extended care of a dependent adult. I found the landline phone in the living room mounted on the wall near the old leather recliner where Oliver used to sit and watch evening news. I picked up the receiver and listened to dead silence. Landline disconnected. No dial tone. I followed the cord down to where it met the wall jack and zoomed in. Phone cord unplugged from wall. Deliberate disconnection. I photographed the note my mother had left, still sitting on the kitchen counter where I'd found it. The casual cruelty of those words looked even worse through a camera lens. After documenting the interior, I stepped outside and walked next door. The neighbors, an older couple named Bill and Patricia Thornton, had lived there for 30 years. They knew my family well enough to recognize calculated cruelty when they saw it. Patricia answered on the second knock, her face softening with sympathy when she saw me. "James, we heard about Oliver. How is he?" "Stable. Can I ask you something? When did you see my parents leave?" Her expression darkened. "December 23rd morning. They were loading suitcases into a hired car, big black SUV. Did they seem worried? Rushed?" "Honey, they seemed excited." She glanced back toward my parents' house. "Your mother was wearing new sunglasses and laughing about something. Your father was checking his watch like he couldn't wait to get going. Did they mention Oliver at all?" Patricia's jaw tightened. "Bill asked them. Said something like, 'Who's watching your dad over the holidays?' Your father said he'll be fine. James is coming home early. But I told them my flight didn't get in until the 25th. They lied to you to make it sound like there was no gap in his care. We know. We saw your car pull in on Christmas Eve night." She shook her head. "James, we didn't know he was alone in there. If we'd known, it's not your fault." I held up my phone. "Would you be willing to repeat that on camera for the investigation?" She didn't hesitate. "Absolutely." I recorded her statement, then crossed the street to talk to Bill, who had been outside when my parents left. His account matched Patricia's, but he added one detail that made my blood run cold. "Your mother made a joke about finally taking a vacation without having to worry about anyone back home. Said something like, 2 weeks of freedom." They both laughed. Bill's face was grim. At the time, I thought she meant freedom from caregiving stress. Now I know what she really meant. I thanked them both and walked back to the dark, freezing house where my grandfather had nearly died. My phone was full of evidence now. Video, photos, timestamps, witness statements from people with no reason to lie. Diane was right. When Stephen and Wendy walked through that door in 11 days, they wouldn't be walking into their home. They'd be walking into a trap. The attic access was in the hallway ceiling. A pull-down ladder that groaned when I yanked the cord. Dust rained down as I climbed into darkness that smelled like old insulation and 50 years of stored memories. I swept my phone's flashlight across the space. Cardboard boxes labeled in my grandmother's neat handwriting, Christmas decorations, old photo albums. The accumulated debris of a family that used to be something other than predatory. The east gable. Behind the insulation. I moved carefully across the joists, testing each step. The attic was unfinished, pink fiberglass insulation stuffed between exposed beams. Near the eastern wall, where the roof line sloped low, I knelt and started pulling back sections of insulation. My fingers hit something solid, a blue plastic folder, the kind with elastic corners, wedged deep into the space between studs. I pulled it free and sat back on my heels, my grandmother's handwriting stark across the front in black marker. For James Smith. When the time comes, my chest tightened. She'd known. Somehow, years before this moment, she'd known I'd be the one kneeling in this attic searching for weapons to fight my own father. I opened the folder. The first document was a formal revocation of power of attorney, dated 4 years ago. 2 months before my grandmother died. I scanned the pages, my flashlight catching on the legal seal. It explicitly stripped Stephen of all rights to act on Oliver's behalf. He had been using an old, expired filing for years, hiding this document to keep control of the estate. The house was to remain in Oliver's name and upon his death pass directly to me. She tried to protect him even from beyond the grave. Beneath the will were bank statements for an account I'd never heard of. A trust fund my grandmother had established in Oliver's name at a different bank. One Stephen apparently didn't know existed. The balance made my breath catch. over $200,000 untouched. And at the bottom of the folder, a handwritten letter on cream stationery with my grandmother's monogram in the corner. My dearest James, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. Your father has always had a hunger in him that no amount of love or money could satisfy. I saw it when he was young, the way he calculated value in every relationship, the way he resented your grandfather's modest success because it wasn't enough to elevate him above his peers. I tried to raise him differently. I failed. Grandma Eleanor knew the truth years ago, and she left a legacy of protection for James to find. Are you brave enough to stand for the truth like James did? Subscribe now and join our community. If we don't speak up for those trapped behind closed doors, who will? Silence is exactly what people like Stephen count on to get away with it. Don't let them stay in the shadows. By the time you find this letter, Stephen will have shown you who he truly is. He will have crossed a line that cannot be uncrossed. And I am sorry, my dear boy, that you will have to be the one to stop him. I have protected what I could, the house, the hidden account, this documentation. But the law moves slowly and cruel men move fast. You must be smarter than he is cruel. You must be patient when every instinct screams for immediate justice. Your grandfather is a good man who trusted the wrong son. Protect him the way Stephen never did. I have lived long enough to know that some people are born with something missing where empathy should live. Your father is one of those people. He will justify anything, even the unthinkable, if it serves his interests. One day his greed will freeze the heart of the home we built. Do not let him win. You have your grandfather's integrity and my spine. That combination is unbeatable. With all my love, Grandma Eleanor, I sat in that dusty attic holding my grandmother's final words and felt something crack open in my chest. She'd known Stephen would try this. Maybe not the exact method, maybe not the thermostat set to 45 degrees or the Christmas cruise, but she'd known he'd eventually try to erase Oliver for convenience and profit. And she'd armed me 4 years ago for a fight I didn't know I'd be having. I carefully placed everything back in the folder and climbed down from the attic, my grandmother's words echoing in my head. His greed will freeze the heart of the home. It already had, but I wasn't going to let it win. The lawyer's name was Ryan Castellano, and we'd served together in the same unit before he went to law school and I went into private security contracting. He specialized in elder abuse cases and had a reputation for being merciless in depositions. We met in his office in downtown Erie 2 days after I found the blue folder. I spread the bank statements across his conference table. 6 months of transactions from Oliver's primary checking account, the one Stephen had power of attorney over. Ryan pulled on reading glasses and started with the most recent statement, his pen moving down the columns of withdrawals. Ryan looked over the top of his glasses, his expression grim. James, since your father never filed the updated papers Eleanor left in that folder, he's been operating on a fraudulent power of attorney for years. In the eyes of the law, that turns irresponsible spending into grand larceny. He wasn't just a bad son, he was a thief from day one. Cash withdrawals, he muttered. 2,000 here, 1,500 there, all rounded numbers, that's never organic spending. He flipped to the next page. And here, transfers to an account ending in 7743. Is that your parents' joint account? I don't know the number. We'll subpoena it. He made a note on his legal pad. What was this account supposed to be used for? Oliver's medical expenses, prescriptions, doctor visits. My grandmother set it up as a medical savings account before she died. Ryan's expression hardened. Then these charges are going to be a problem for your father. He turned the statements toward me and started pointing. December 10th, Caribbean Cruise Lines, $5,200. That's not a basic package, that's upgraded cabins and premium dining. He moved his finger down. December 12th, Nordstrom, $3,800. December 15th, Louis Vuitton, $2,200. He looked up. James, your parents spent over $10,000 in 1 week preparing for a vacation while your grandfather's prescription refills were being declined for insufficient funds. I felt my jaw clench. Can you prove the prescriptions were declined? If we subpoena pharmacy records, yes, and we will. Ryan flipped back through earlier statements. This pattern goes back months. Look, September, Bloomingdale's, 1600, October. Resort spa in the Poconos, 3 nights, premium suite, 4100, November, another cash withdrawal, 3,000. How much total? Ryan pulled out a calculator and started adding. The silence stretched while numbers accumulated. Finally, he looked up. In the last 6 months, your father transferred or withdrew $47,000 from your grandfather's medical account. And based on these merchant names, maybe 8,000 of it went to anything that could remotely be justified as Oliver's care. The number sat between us like evidence of murder, which in a way it was. They'd been slowly draining the account that was supposed to keep Oliver alive while upgrading their lifestyle to luxury they couldn't afford on their own income. Can we prove intent? I asked. Intent to defraud? Absolutely. Power of attorney creates a fiduciary duty. Your father was legally obligated to use that account only for Oliver's benefit. Instead, he used it like a personal slush fund. Ryan pulled the statements together and tapped them into a neat stack. Combined with the thermostat evidence and the abandonment, this isn't just elder abuse. It's financial exploitation with attempted manslaughter. What happens when they get back? We present everything to Adult Protective Services and the district attorney simultaneously. APS will file for emergency removal of Stephen's power of attorney. The DA will decide whether to press criminal charges. Ryan leaned back. Your grandmother's hidden trust fund is going to be crucial. It proves Oliver had assets your father didn't control, which is probably why Stephen was so eager to... He paused, choosing his words carefully. To eliminate the problem before Oliver could change his mind about family dynamics. I stared at the bank statements and thought about my mother laughing as they loaded cruise luggage. My father checking his watch, eager to start his vacation funded by stealing from a dying man. How long until they're home? Ryan glanced at his desk calendar. You said they left December 23rd for 2 weeks. Yeah, they'll be back January 6th. Good. That gives us 9 days to make this case absolutely bulletproof. He pulled out a fresh legal pad. Let's build a timeline that ends with your parents in handcuffs. My mother's call came on New Year's Day while I was sitting in Oliver's hospital room watching him sleep. The caller ID showed an international number. I let it ring 3 times while I reminded myself what Diane had said about giving them advance warning. Don't let them know. Let them stay comfortable. Let them think they won. I answered on the 4th ring. James, Happy New Year, sweetheart. My mother's voice was bright and breezy, with that artificial cheer she used when she wanted to pretend everything was fine. I could hear music in the background, the clink of glasses, laughter. Mom, I just wanted to check in. Make sure you got settled okay. We know you arrived early. Such a wonderful surprise. How's everything at the house? I looked at Oliver's sleeping face. At the IV line in his arm, at the monitors tracking his slow recovery from hypothermia my parents had deliberately inflicted. Everything's fine. And Dad, is he doing okay? I know he can be a handful, but he's really very self-sufficient for his age. Self-sufficient. The man they'd left to freeze to death in a locked room with no phone and no heat. He's managing, I said carefully. Oh, good. I told Stephen you'd handle it just fine. You're so responsible. She laughed, that tinkling sound she made at charity events. We were a little worried when we realized you'd be there a day early, but I'm sure you figured it out. Figured out that they'd tried to murder him, she meant. Figured out that they'd set the thermostat to 45 degrees and disappeared for 2 weeks, hoping nature would take care of their inconvenient problem. Yeah, I figured it out. Well, we just wanted you to know we're having the most wonderful time. The ship is gorgeous, James. You'd love it. Steven says we should do this every year. Another laugh. Maybe next Christmas you can join us. Wouldn't that be fun? Next Christmas. As if there would be another Christmas. As if they weren't walking toward a legal ambush that would destroy everything they'd built. Maybe, I said. There was a pause and I could hear her taking a drink of something. When she spoke again, her voice had shifted slightly, testing. James, honey, you didn't turn the heat up too much at the house, did you? Your father set it low before we left. Dad likes his room cool, you know how he is about that. There it was, the gaslighting, the preemptive narrative construction. Oliver likes it cold. We were respecting his preferences. Any reasonable person would have done the same. My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. I adjusted it, I said evenly. Oh, well, that's fine. Just don't make it too warm. Dad always complains when it's above 65. She laughed again. He's probably already griping at you about the thermostat, isn't he? Oliver hadn't spoken a word about temperature preferences. He'd whispered about stolen money and hidden folders and not letting them take the rest. He hasn't complained. See? I told you he'd be fine. You worry too much, sweetheart. It's sweet, but really, Dad's tougher than he looks. Tough enough to survive what they'd done to him, barely. When are you coming back? I asked. The 6th. We dock in Miami that morning and we'll catch a flight home that afternoon. Should be back by dinner. Her voice brightened. I can't wait to see you both. I got Dad the cutest little souvenir, a snow globe from Cozumel. A snow globe for the man they'd left to freeze. That's great, Mom. All right, honey, I should go. Steven's waving at me. They're starting the midnight buffet. Love you. Love you too, I said automatically and hated myself for it. The line went dead. I sat in the sterile hospital room holding my phone, listening to Oliver's steady breathing. Thinking about my mother sipping cocktails on a cruise ship deck while her father-in-law fought to recover from what she'd done. January 6th. 5 more days. I looked at Oliver and thought about my grandmother's letter. You must be patient when every instinct screams for immediate justice. I'd been patient. I'd documented everything, built the case. Let them enjoy their vacation. In 5 days, the trap would close. The hired car pulled into the driveway at 4:30 on January 6th, right on schedule. Through the living room window, I watched my parents climb out, both wearing resort tans and linen clothes that looked expensive. My father tipped the driver while my mother stretched in the fading winter light, her new sunglasses pushed up on her head. They looked relaxed, happy. Like people returning from a vacation with nothing to hide. Steven pulled 2 large suitcases from the trunk, new luggage, matching set, probably charged to Oliver's medical account, and Wendy carried shopping bags with designer logos I recognized from the bank statements. I sat on the couch in the living room I'd restored to a livable temperature. To my left, Diane Vasquez reviewed notes on her tablet. To my right, Officer Kevin Brennan from the Erie Police Department sat with his hands folded, his uniform crisp and official. Ryan Castellano stood near the fireplace, his briefcase open on the mantel. We'd rehearsed this, quick, clean, undeniable. The front door opened. God, it's good to be home. My mother's voice rang through the hallway. James, honey, we're back. They appeared in the living room doorway, still smiling, their vacation glow intact for exactly 2 more seconds. My father saw me first, then Diane, then the police officer. His smile didn't fade immediately. It sort of froze on his face, confusion bleeding into the edges before the whole expression collapsed. My mother's shopping bags hit the floor. "James?" Stephen's voice was careful now, recalibrating. "What's going on? Who are these people?" "Mr. and Mrs. Smith, I'm Diane Vasquez with Adult Protective Services. This is Officer Brennan. We need to speak with you about the condition in which your son found Oliver Smith on December 24th. My mother's hand went to her throat. "Is Dad okay? What happened?" The performance was impressive. Genuine concern, maternal worry. If I hadn't found Oliver shivering in that freezing room, I might have believed it. "Oliver is alive," I said quietly. "No thanks to you." "James, what are you?" Stephen started. "Sit down," Diane interrupted, her voice flat. "Both of you." Something in her tone made them obey. They sank onto the love seat across from us, their vacation clothes suddenly looking ridiculous in the context of what was coming. Diane opened her tablet. On December 24th at approximately 8:45 p.m., paramedics responded to this address for a medical emergency. They found Oliver Smith suffering from severe hypothermia. His core body temperature was 89 degrees. He'd been left alone in an unheated house with the thermostat manually set to 45 degrees, insufficient food, and no working phone. That's not, Wendy stammered. "The thermostat must have malfunctioned. We would never—" "The thermostat was functioning perfectly," Officer Brennan cut in. "It was set manually. We have photographic evidence, timestamp, witness statements from paramedics." Ryan stepped forward, pulling documents from his briefcase. "We also have 6 months of bank records showing you withdrew $47,000 from the Family Maintenance Trust. It was an account specifically set aside for Oliver's house taxes and medical care, but Stephen had linked it to his own debit card. Funds that were spent on luxury goods, resort vacations, and the cruise you just returned from." My father's face had gone white. "I had power of attorney. I was authorized to use those funds for Oliver's benefit, not your own." Ryan's voice was surgical. "That's called financial exploitation. Combined with the abandonment and endangerment, you're looking at multiple felony charges." The room went silent except for the ticking of the mantel clock. My mother's tan suddenly looked garish against her pale face. My father's hands trembled. "We left a note," Stephen said weakly. "We told James to take care of him." "I wasn't supposed to arrive until Christmas Day," I said. "You left on the 23rd. You were hoping he'd be dead before I got here." My mother started crying, but the tears looked calculated, practiced. Diane stood. "Effective immediately, your power of attorney over Oliver Smith is revoked. He will be placed under emergency protective custody. The district attorney has been given our full report and will determine what criminal charges to file." She looked at them with something close to contempt. "You should contact an attorney. You're going to need one." The mediation took place 3 weeks later in a conference room that smelled like furniture polish and defeat. Stephen and Wendy sat on one side of the table with their attorney, a woman in her 50s who looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. On our side sat Ryan, Diane, Oliver, and me. Oliver had been released from the hospital 5 days earlier, his color restored, his strength returning slowly but steadily. My parents looked smaller somehow. The tans had faded. The designer clothes had been replaced with discount store business casual. The weight of impending criminal charges had stripped away the veneer of prosperity they'd worked so hard to project. Ryan slid a document across the polished table. "This is a voluntary relinquishment of all claims to the property located at 847 Maple Drive, Erie, Pennsylvania. By signing, you acknowledge that the house belongs solely to Oliver Smith with a life estate provision. Upon his death, it passes directly to his grandson, James Smith. You will have no inheritance rights, no visitation rights without explicit permission, and no future claim to any of Oliver's assets or estate. Stephen's attorney leaned in to whisper something. He shook his head, his jaw tight. "We don't have a choice, do we?" my father said finally. "No," Ryan replied. "You don't. The alternative is we proceed with criminal prosecution for elder abuse, financial exploitation, and attempted manslaughter. The district attorney has agreed to reduce charges to misdemeanor neglect with probation if you sign today. If you refuse, you'll face felony charges and likely prison time." My mother's hands shook as she reached for the pen. "This isn't fair. We were just trying to—" "To what?" Oliver's voice cut through the room like a blade. It was the first time he'd spoken during the entire meeting. "To steal my money? To let me freeze so you could declare me incompetent and ship me off to a state ward just to flip this house for a profit?" "Which part wasn't fair, Wendy?" She flinched, looked away, said nothing. Stephen signed first, his signature angry and sharp. Wendy followed, tears running down her face that no one in the room believed were genuine. Ryan collected the documents and placed them in his briefcase with a finality that sounded like a closing door. "You're required to return $47,000 in misappropriated funds within 90 days. Failure to do so will result in immediate criminal charges." He stood. "This mediation is concluded." Diane escorted my parents out. They didn't look at Oliver, didn't look at me. Just walked out of that conference room and out of our lives. 2 hours later, I sat in Oliver's kitchen, the kitchen I'd found dark and freezing on Christmas Eve, and watched evening light pour through clean windows. The house was warm now, 72 degrees. The thermostat had been replaced with a new programmable model that I'd locked with a code only Oliver and I knew. Oliver sat across from me with a cup of tea, his hands steady around the ceramic mug. The blue folder sat on the table between us, my grandmother's handwriting still visible on the cover. "She knew," Oliver said quietly. "Eleanor knew this would happen. She armed us for it. She armed you." He looked at me with eyes that were clear and sharp. "I wouldn't have survived without you, James. You know that, right?" I thought about the freezing house, the rattling bed frame, the slate blue lips, about how close we'd come to a different ending. "You don't have to thank me for stopping them from murdering you." "I'm not thanking you for that." He reached across the table and gripped my hand. "I'm thanking you for choosing justice over revenge, for building a case instead of just calling them screaming. Your grandmother would be so proud." We sat in that warm, brightly lit kitchen as winter darkness settled over Erie, and for the first time since I'd come home for Christmas, the house felt safe. Justice has been served and the house is finally warm again. But there are thousands of Olivers out there tonight who aren't as lucky. If you've ever had to stand up against a bully or a family member who betrayed your trust, comment loyalty below. Your engagement ensures we can keep telling these stories and bringing the darkness into the light. Don't let their story end here. Subscribe and be the voice for those who can't fight back.